Hey, morning, everybody. I've been gone for a few weeks, so it feels good to be back and good to see all of you and good to be a part of C2, 3, 4. Um, and actually, I want to. I've been gone for a few weeks, so it feels good to be back this morning. And I want to talk a little bit about what I've been doing the last couple of weeks. And because I found it quite inspiring. I spent a week out in Pacific Northwest, a little more than, and then was back home for a few days, and then went out to New Mexico because my wife was graduating from the Living School, which is Richard Rohr's kind of alternative seminary. Really amazing. So it's just a nonstop action until yesterday, really. So, but I've been reflecting on some things about my experience. But first of all, quick question. How many of you are retired or mostly retired? Okay, so why would I want to talk about vocation? Doesn't make any sense. Wrong audience, right? There's something, well, I'll just get straight to the definition, and then I'll begin to try to unpack it. First of all, vocation in French means calling. Okay? Calling. It's something quite different than occupation. Correct? You can have an occupation and it's not much of a calling, or you can have a calling and it's not your occupation, right? And calling is old-fashioned. How old-fashioned? It comes right out of the Greek world of myth and story and legend. Their word for it would be something like destiny. Called forth out beyond yourself. That's how we started this morning with that reading, which was from David White, probably. A true vocation calls us out beyond ourselves, which doesn't sound like much of the American dream right now, calling out beyond oneself, correct? On the right and the left. It's really true. It's calling into oneself and my way and my rights and so forth. So vocation is something like calling in French, but the root is Latin. And the Latin root is vox, and so forth, meaning voice. Your vocation is your voice, your true voice, we might say. Or I like to say, this is actually my personal metaphor for the soul, as your voice beneath your voice. You have a voice or a song beneath your song. And to have contact with that and to touch that in some way and to learn to sing that kind of melody is to find a vocation. And it doesn't matter if you're retired or not. That's my point. In fact, we can spend, as I am doing and will probably continue to do, struggling in our life with our occupation and how much meaning it has and how much it doesn't. Am I in the wrong one? Am I in the right one? In part because something of our truer vocation or our voice wants to be born in the world, wants to be heard in the world. You remember Wayne Dyer? Love that guy. He used to always say, you don't want to die with your song still in you. I think that's a quote from somebody. I just remember it from him, though. See, the song, that what he means is vocation, your voice, your vox. And I want to talk about the title of today's talk is a universal vocation. And I mean that in two senses, neither of which I'm going to answer very well. The first is a question. Is there such thing as a universal vocation that all human beings share? So yes, you have an individual voice, but is there such thing as a universal calling or vocation or voice? In other words, what is the human song collectively? Or if you want to put it in terms of potential, what could the human song be collectively? Certainly better than the one we're probably singing right now, correct? So I just like that to hold that as a question. The other is related. The other side of universal vocation is, what does your voice, your personal vox, your personal vocation, how does it serve the universal? This came up. This came up in the pre-talk thing. I thought of a metaphor. Surprise. um, to me, it's awesome. All right. You should watch the World Cup. All right, because there is meaning and purpose in the universe, and the World Cup is part of it. And what's amazing is that before the teams play, they always play the national anthems of the various countries, correct? Just watch it sometime. Watch when they play the French national anthem or the Spanish national anthem. You watch. Every single person in the crowd sings. Every time. Okay? Now, what do we do in American sporting events? It's become a competition for who can do the best solo. Okay? That is symbolic, I'd like to suggest, of a couple of things, but I'm just going to pick up on one, which is what we seem to value right now is a kind of obsession with one's individual solo performance, not the collective. It's the national anthem, not Lady Gaga's song or whoever, you know? And we seem to think the more amazing the person's vocal ramblings are in the national anthem, the more excited we get. It's sad in a way. So universal vocation, I'm suggesting, is you have an individual voice, and how does it serve the universal? That's the question. That comes straight from Aristotle. Remember a few weeks ago when I said what Aristotle called the definition of an idiot, what the word idiot means in Greek? One who refuses to participate in the city or the polis. That's an idiot. That's the solo artist. By themselves, you know. Anyway, I thought it was an awesome metaphor. So those are questions I have. What does it mean to use your voice now, the voice that you have? And actually, your voice gets better with age, we might say. You learn more of your true tune, and therefore more of it's needed in the world. Really. What is your calling now? Like, what if you met someone at a party, you know, and they ask you, well, if you're retired, they might ask you, what did you do? And you said, oh, I just sang my song. You're like, oh, this guy's kind of weird. I'm not talking to them anymore. But that's who we are. That's actually what people are interested in. They're not interested in your vocation. They are on the surface. They can judge you. But beneath that, people want to know what's your song? What are you born to sing and be in the world? So some thoughts from the Pacific Northwest. So when I was there, I taught at a church. My friend Ryan Meeks has a church there. And taught there a couple times, and I led 2 retreats. So I got to spend, these are wilderness-oriented retreats, so I got to spend 5 or 6 days out in the Cascades. And one of the questions I ask people on retreats, I ask them, what's the song of this place that we're in right now? What's the song of this place? And whenever you're in a wild place for more than a half an hour, and especially more than a day or two, the particular song of a place, you start to hear it. And it requires all of your senses, really. Your 5 senses, plus your imagination, plus your thinking mind, or all 4 directions, if you remember them the way I was articulating them from Bill Plotkin. Something of our full-faceted self is the thing that begins to hear the song of a particular place. And if you're there long enough, like I was, you really start to hear even the song of a particular valley, the song of a day. When was the last time you got up with the sun and were up with the sun outside all day long until the sun crept behind the mountains? That's a certain kind of song that the earth is singing and that the river is singing, the trees are singing, not to mention the birds that are singing and the butterflies that are migrating. It's a song. It's more like a symphony. And human beings are just as natural as everything in the symphonic, wild world. We came up out of the same forest. We are the same forest. You know, we've had a year of talking about Terra, but don't forget, Terra is not something that you are not. You are the earth. You are an expression of the dream of the earth. That's Thomas Berry. Just as the earth dreamed up the butterfly, you are that kind of expression, that kind of dream. So we need more than ever people, this is me sort of preaching a bit, but we need more than ever people who are learning what the song of the earth is, right? We have been singing our solos so loudly that we can't hear the song of the earth, both in its beauty and untapped wildness and in its suffering, largely at human expense. Both those tunes are happening. And you've probably heard of, like, I just thought of, what's it called? Biomimicry. You've heard of this? It's part of how people are imagining if we're going to survive ourselves and what we've done, we need our technologies and ways of being and cultures to imitate, that's biomimicry, imitate the natural world. How else are we going to survive? But you can't do that if you can't hear the song. If you can't hear the song. Actually, headphones are a great metaphor. Now, I love headphones. They give me like a special feeling like I'm in a music soundtrack when I happen to be walking down the street. They're an amazing invention. But they also, just now as I'm thinking about it, are a bit symbolic of our inability to listen to the song of the earth. We'd rather listen to a pre-programmed version of our world and isolate ourselves out like the national anthem tends to be. So these are things I've been thinking about. When I was there, part of the retreats, there'd be some teaching and some other things, and we'd send people out to do various wanders and ceremonies and things like this. And I found myself wandering out and crossing this stream, and I happened to stumble into a little patch of old growth forest that I didn't know was there. And there aren't that many of them in the Pacific Northwest. And it just happened to be a tiny patch right by the river. Perhaps that year, when they were cutting all the trees down, the river was such they couldn't get down to this section. That was my guess. Because the river changes every year because of snowmelt. And I wandered into this place, and it was like an ecosystem within an ecosystem. That's the way it felt, like a world within a world. I came out of the river and stumbled into the world of really one central elder tree. And around this tree, maybe 20 others, but particularly one in the middle. And it created, this tree, an entire landscape that was unlike anything else in the forest. You could barely walk on it. It was so spongy. And around this tree, all the fallen branches over the years filled with moss and their own tiny ecosystems with little spiders and plant life, like a world within a world within a world within a world. And it was so quiet. Partly, I could use science because of the moss and whatever, but who cares? The song that it was singing, and this tree was standing there before any white people were ever on this continent, or that part of the world, at the very least. That's a long time. And hopefully it will be there, well, for sure, it'll be there, barring some unusual circumstances, when I'm gone. What kind of song is that little patch of forest singing in the world? And a question in terms of vocation, how do I harmonize with the song of the earth? What if I cut it down, built a platform, and sang the national anthem? This is followed by, this land is my land. It seems silly. So how does my own voice harmonize with the wild world? And what happens in wild places for people is they begin to hear this song, and it begins to remind them of what it means to be a human being. That's the kind of miracle of it. Even if you stand on the shore of Lake Michigan long enough and ask yourself, what is the song of this place? In a sense, you feel humiliated in the best possible sense. It's humbling. Especially stand out there in a storm. You know, whenever the weather people are like, take cover, I think, nah, you know, let's go stand on the edge of the approaching storm. What song is being sung? So it's humbling, but also on this, at the same time, something of one's own voice. Like, who am I? How did I end up here? What's mine to be in the world, to do in the world, begins to echo in the wind. How did I end up here? The mystery of life itself. This is what happens. There's like a conversation that happens between your deep self or your true voice and the voice of the world, the voice of the earth, if we can take our headphones out long enough. Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you get a sense for what I'm saying? You get a sense for what's real. You get a sense for perhaps sometimes it even functions as a mirror for a bit of our true vocation. What is the wild world mirroring back to us? Or as Thomas Berry puts it, there's a song, I'm using song, but he says there's a story told by humans to one another that will also be the story that the wood thrush sings in the thicket. Do you hear that? There's a song, it's collective, part of why I'm using the word universal vocation, that is human, that's also the song of the wood thrush or the sandhill crane. Don't you love those little dinosaurs that pass through? That's what they remind me of. They pass through, there they are, but there's strange noises. So this is important. Much depends on the future, the well-being of the planet and our own future and your great-great-grandchildren depends in part upon our capacity to hear this song again. So what does this have to do with universal vocation? I thought of Mary Oliver's poem. She says the wild geese, or we can say the sandhill crane, or the, what did Thomas Berry say? The wood thrush, or the wings of a butterfly, or the sound of the edge of the water and the sand. Mary Oliver says that the wild geese honk, harsh and exciting, announcing over and over again your place in the family of things. Your place in the family of things. Most people in our culture feel lost. It's true. In part because we've gone so insane the modern world has gone so insane. And the wild world offers itself to your imagination over and over again, announcing your place in the family of things. But you have to hear the song to hear how it announces your place in the family of things. Am I making sense? So in part, what am I saying? I'm saying, go listen to the song of the earth. If you want to know more about your own vocation, your own voice, listen to the sound of the earth. Listen to the song of the wood thrush. It sounds counterintuitive. That's how far removed we are, I think, from the wisdom. Okay, and then what did I do after that? I went to New Mexico. And this was an amazing opportunity to be around really three, I guess they're what I might call living wisdom teachers. This is Richard Rohr and Cynthia Bourgeot and James Finley, who was with Thomas Merton in the monastery in Kentucky, Cistercian, and left. Really amazing presence. Actually, that's probably the sign of a good teacher, that their presence communicates more than the notes that you might be scribbling down will ever communicate. So anyway, I got to be around these three teachers for a few days. And one of the themes that came up I thought was interesting. Richard Rohr has a new book called The Universal Christ. And I haven't read the book, but I was trying to sort of listen to what he was saying about the content of the book and sort of the argument that he was making. And he said some very interesting things. He said, Christ is the name that I'm using for logos, or logos is a Greek word meaning origin or reason or essence, something like that. And he said, Christ is the word that I'm using for the divine indwelling in all things. And he also would say, Christ wasn't Jesus' last name, which is kind of funny. He says, Christ is the symbol to which the human man points. And there's something transcendent. And there's something in his mind of Christ in all things. But he doesn't necessarily, he's not trying to put Christianity onto everything. He says, rather, Christ is the name for the divine indwelling of all things, from the stone and the tree and the butterfly. That's an enchanted, sacred view of the universe. And which, by the way, he's saying this sounds like heresy, but it's only because we just haven't been paying attention to the best of the wisdom tradition buried inside Christianity. It only sounds like heresy. He went on to say what we've done is locate the incarnation in a person. You know what incarnation is? Infleshment in Latin. Say, well, Jesus was the enfleshment of God. And Richard Rohr, as a priest, by the way, a Franciscan priest, says, okay, fine, but that's only a symbol of what's true in all things. But we've located it just in the person. Or if you're Catholic, also in the bread and wine. But even that was a step toward expanding what was the mystery of the incarnation, the divine indwelling in all things. So I took this as a kind of challenge. First of all, I would like to see the world like that. That there's something of the mystery of the divine, even if we might not even agree on exactly what we mean by the divine, the mystery in the essence of all things. The stone, the bread, the wine, the butterfly, the wood thrush, and the sandhill crane, and even you. And even people you don't agree with politically. And the immigrant. And the native person. And that is a radical vision of the world. And that's what struck me about being there. I thought, wow, radical means root, which I think is just interesting in and of itself. This is a rooted and radical vision of the world that has the potential to transform, particularly the religious landscape, which is a big portion of the world. We need more of this. And then he said something else, which got me thinking about this word universal vocation. He said, if you have something like faith in the mysterious divine presence embedded in all things, if you have a taste of that, you have an obligation to live publicly and speak to that. So let's just take immigration, for example. Have you noticed it's a bit of a contentious issue? But he's saying, as a priest, if you really believe in the divine indwelling in all beings, not only is your voice needed in the world, it's your responsibility to speak about such things. Which it sort of gets at what Thomas Berry is saying in the second half of this quote. We must, however, reflect on what is happening. What is happening, people? To the planet, to countries, to systems, to corporations, which are people. What's happening? Seriously, what is happening in the world? We must, however, reflect on what is happening. It is an urgent matter, especially for those of us who still live in a meaningful, even numinous earth community. I don't know who he's speaking about. He's probably saying this because he was in a community, a monastic community, so there was something healthier about it, maybe in his view, I don't know. Or maybe Grand Haven or West Michigan is healthier than other parts of the planet. I see some people shaking their heads no. But there's still some structure of meaning, he's saying. So we must, he says, especially for those of us still living in a meaningful, even numinous earth community, we have not spoken. That's that challenge. He's sort of drawing the arrow, saying, you have not spoken out. And this is the personal challenge I feel, in my own life. And I can't just say, well, I'm giving a public talk right now, so that counts. What does it mean to speak out for the universal? What does it mean? One of the things we're going to do this fall, preview, is return to some of our values. Where did they come from? I actually want to compare some of our values to Aristotle. I've been doing a lot of reading about Aristotle lately, who was a genius, really. And even before there were the virtues and vices in Christianity, there was Aristotle with his 12 virtues. That's someone who thought hard about what does it mean to be a human being? What is our relationship with the community and what is our relationship with nature? So we have a responsibility, I think, to listen to the voices of the past. But my point is, these values are born, we're born somewhere in the human community that you say you hold. What he's saying here is, drawing the arrow and saying, you have to speak about them publicly. You have to argue for them. You have to live them. You have to let them rub up against the vices, if you just want to put it in those kind of dualistic terms, virtues and vices. It's not enough to hold them privately and just talk about them on your Facebook feed that everybody agrees with already. Do you know what I'm saying? The issue goes far beyond economics or commerce or poetics or even pleasantries as we look out over a scenic view. Something is happening beyond all this. We are losing splendid and intimate modes of divine presence. That's that Richard Rohr's way of saying it is universal Christ. You might think of your own way of saying it. And we are perhaps losing ourselves. Sort of a sad ending to the quote here. So what's my point? My point is, what of your vocation is connected to the song of the earth? How is your voice in harmony in the symphony of the earth community? And second of all, how is your voice out in the public sphere? Your vocation. Not your occupation, but your vocation in the deeper sense. What's it like to be you? And what's it like to sing your song in the public sphere? And there are a lot of ways to sing your song in the public sphere. And like I said at the beginning, Aristotle says you're an idiot if you don't. By definition, cutting yourself off from the polis. So I'm probably saying things that aren't totally new to you. One of the things that impresses me and continues to impress me is there's so many people here who are engaged in the public conversation. And a public conversation about values and meaning and more universal values and meaning. So keep going is part of what I'm saying. One of the things that came up in our pre-talk was when we were having a big conversation about occupation as largely the way we define vocation. And then the image of the elder came up. And the elder is such an interesting archetype because the elder is not paid, correct? No one thinks, hey, I'm an elder, time to cash in, you know? It doesn't have anything to do with occupation or payment or job or employment. It is the voice that you have earned over the course of a lifetime that has to be sung in the public sphere. I know our culture worships youth, but that's just because we're a silly culture. It's ridiculous. You've heard the Native American saying, no wise person ever wanted to be younger. See? That is a culture that has its head on straight. Okay, so here are my questions. Or an observation first. Our vocation is personal and universal. Even if I'm not working too hard to define what I mean, it's personal and universal. It's ours and not ours. It's not a solo, though. We simply play a part in the symphony of things. Here are my questions. What is your song? What's the song that you want to sing? In some ways, you don't know until you begin to sing it. That's that scary public side. What song or songs serve the earth's future? That's a question I have. What song is in tune with the song of the forest? What songs repair the ideological harm that's all over the place? I like ideological harm because it sums up all the isms, all the religions, and all of the philosophies, ideologies that have a dark side, which is all of them. So, what songs are you singing to repair these broken ideological songs? What songs respect the universal dignity of every person? How might your song, the song that you're singing, your true vocation, also respect the dignity of every human person and every living being? Here are some other things. What songs sing of, here are some old-fashioned words. What songs sing of morality, ethics, service, and sacrifice? Remember those things? Morality, ethics, service, sacrifice. I know we don't need any of that in the political sphere, but everything else, we could use some help. What songs are more beautiful than Twitter? What songs respect the past, the wisdom, and follies of the human story? These are questions that I have personally. I hope they also have some universal appeal to them. So I want to do two things. I want to invite Keith up for a few minutes, who's visiting us today. And I'll do that in just a second. But I just thought of Mary Oliver's poem, The Journey, which changed my life. And near the end of it, she says, little by little you left their voices behind. These are the voices that shout bad advice from earlier in the poem. I'm not going to do the whole thing now, but little by little, as you left their voices behind, the voices that shout their bad advice, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds. The stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and you begin to hear a voice that you slowly recognized as your own. That's the vocation. That's what I'm talking about. Slowly but surely, as you left their voices behind, the voices that shout their bad advice, the voices that are trying to claim your identity and give you an ideology and tell you who you are, stars begin to burn through the sheets of clouds, and you begin to hear a voice that you slowly recognize as your own, that keeps you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world. That part of the poem, I think, when we're talking about discovering vocation, and voice, it's not that you walk further and further away from the world, but more deeply into it. The voice that keeps you company draws you further and further into the world and all of its complexities. That's what I got for you today. Keith?
I've been hearing good things from you people. I want to talk about words this morning, words that I don't understand, uh, and some words that unfortunately I do understand. Words like cisplatin, a recipe for of chemotherapy that is supposed to be the real best one for bladder cancer, that was found as a stage 4 metastatic cancer. And it sent seeds to the left kidney's lymph nodes. And further on, after the cisplatin didn't do the trick, they said we could try another because it had injured the kidney in the process. So, tried carboplatin. You ever heard that word? And the same thing happened, except it didn't injure the body. So he said, we got one more thing to try, and that's immunotherapy with Optivo. Some of you have been down this road, I'm pretty sure, in a group like this. Anybody know what it's like to have cancer? Yeah? A lot. So, in the process of diagnosis, cardiac artery disease showed up, type 2 diabetes showed up, and the medicine that they provided for these various things gave me real bad dreams and hallucinations. So I even wrote some of those down, but I'm not going to tell you bad dreams. So there's a stage of decline, and when the last one didn't work, the oncologist said, we recommend hospice. And so that very week, they came over and explained everything, and I signed up. It's my choice. I can do it or not. So the nurses come, and they have a PA type of nurse that comes as the doctor. And you quit going to your regular doctors unless there's a choice that you want to make. And if you go to the regular doctor, you sign out of hospice. And then if they'll take you back, you sign back in. It didn't work. Anyway, this booklet is called Journey's End, a guide to understanding the final stages of the dying process. And I changed that title for myself. And I've put Human Life's Journey Ends, New Life Begins. A guide to understanding the final stages of the dying process, the guide to new life to be written later. Stay tuned. So, And written reminds me that I have the basics of my second book written. And if I get a clear head long enough, it's going to the printer. And it hasn't gone yet. But here's a diagram. There are 4 circles interlocking: physical, mental, spiritual, emotional - social. When a person is dying, changes take place in each of these areas. They may occur at different times and different rates. But the physical changes that occur are related to the end stage progressive disease. And I think I have realized about 3 different steps where I lost my skills in one or more of those areas. And I've noticed that the spiritual has changed in the opposite direction. Spirituality for me has taken a bounce. None of this period has been accompanied with fear, depression, and part of it is the relationship that I have with you people. I've been getting cards. We had a birthday party on May the 19th. Some of you were there. I was overwhelmed in this emotional, social part of my life, and the bank filled right up with joy and with confidence. And it was unconditional love. Unconditional. And here I'd been living, starting on my Christian walk, with conditional love, with shame, guilt, fear, and so on. But after I was related to this community, and Tom Weber had a big part in getting me started and interested. We worked in the same nonprofit, the PET, we called it the PET Holland, where the personal energy transportation carts are made and shipped. And C3 was having a mission fair, you may remember, and that was one big day at Exchange Street, and we've worked together, and we seem to be humming the same tune. Our song, singing that song together, to use the metaphor that Kent gave us. And that brings me to the end of this. So it was supposed to be 5 minutes altogether, but I wanted to sing the song that's been going through my mind in the last 6 or longer weeks while Kent was talking Tara. And the C3 people who send cards to people sent me the title of that song, and it is What a Wonderful World. I invite you to join me. I see trees of green, red roses too. I watch them bloom for me and you. I see skies of blue clouds of white, bright blessed days, dark sacred nights, and I think to myself, it's a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also seen in faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands and having a hug or two. They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies crying. I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I say to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I say to myself, what a wonderful world. And thank you, Kent. Thank you.